Good evening, my name is John and I live in Tennessee. I am 35 years old and I work as a software analyst. Because of this, I spend most of my days in an office in front of a computer. And although it's a job I like, the truth is it can become overwhelming if you're not careful. In fact, there was a period in my life when I even became depressed and I felt very mentally burned out due to the lack of space and how monotonous my days were. Fortunately, I've had good friends who have been able to lend me a hand in these difficult moments. And among them is Thomas, an old friend from my neighborhood. One night, while having a beer with him at a nearby bar, he invited me on a camping trip and some hiking, assuring me that what I needed was some fresh air and time outdoors. I was a bit reluctant, but then he insisted and told me that if it didn't work out, he would pay for the first 5 sessions with a psychologist himself. That proposal seemed funny to me and I ended up accepting. I took my sneakers, some blankets, and everything he said I would need. To my surprise, Thomas was right about a lot of things. That 2-day trip into the mountains was extremely exhausting. I sweated as never before and nearly threw up from exhaustion, but it was totally worth it. The landscapes were stunning and beautiful. I felt free from daily stress. And although it wasn't one of my best nights of sleep, they were definitely the most relaxing days I've had in years. I also met incredible people who today are part of my circle of friends. From that moment, which I believe was about 7 years ago, it became a habit for me to go hiking and camping on weekends. Gradually I grew fond of this activity, and a part of me wanted to explore little-known places. Over time I started buying my own gear, like a better backpack for trips of that kind, more comfortable footwear, my own tent, and even a sleeping pad and a mat to make the nights more pleasant. Sometimes it rained, sometimes it was windy, but sometimes the sky was clear and I could see the starry sky. It's undoubtedly a beautiful and relaxing activity for anyone who wants to give it a chance. Although on one occasion I didn't find peace and relaxation, but terror on the mountain trip. It all happened in mid-March, about 2 years ago. Could say she was an experienced person at hiking and camping. And sometimes I had gone on trips alone to clear my thoughts. But on that occasion I wanted to spend time with my girlfriend Olivia, whom I met on another trip. I proposed that we go camping from Thursday to Easter Sunday. The problem is that Olivia, unlike me, did have to work during Easter because she is a doctor. I felt a bit sad, since it was a last-minute change that neither of us expected. She suggested postponing it until the following Friday, which I agreed to. However, Thursday morning, just as we were about to unpack our things, I decided that I had invested a lot of time planning everything and told her I would go alone. Without a doubt, one of the biggest mistakes I have made. I grabbed my bag, my tent, and everything I needed from her bag and got in my car. I kissed her and told her we would see each other on Sunday. I drove along a remote road for about 2 hours, until I reached the national park I was heading to, a mountain surrounded by lush trees. I parked my car near the park ranger station. I signed a book with my name and my ID. I left them Olivia's number in case of an emergency and told them when I planned to return, Sunday around noon or maybe in the afternoon. They looked at me strangely, though I didn't quite understand why. They wished me a good trip and without further delay, I walked into the forest along a beautiful and wide trail. After 3 hours, I reached an excellent place to camp. The first 2 days were great. I dedicated myself to exploring the area and I disconnected from everything bad. I set up a camp, cooked at the campfire, and relaxed. The first night passed without problems, and on Friday, I explored a nearby trail that led me to a creek. I didn't meet anyone along the way, and I felt really alone, in the best sense. However, I had a strange sensation that I attributed to my imagination immediately. I still don't know if it had to do with what I experienced at night, but it was as if I were being watched. It was only for a second, and my immediate reaction was to turn toward a point in the forest and stare at the trees. Not a branch moved. from the wind, and obviously I didn't see anything. But for a second, it was as if someone was stalking me. Still, I assumed it was my imagination, or that perhaps a servant was watching me from a distance. After all, those animals tend to come very close to these sources of water. I washed my face in the creek and stayed there until I got hungry. As I said, Friday was a normal day, but Friday night things really got strange. I was around my campfire, relaxing on an unrollable field chair. If I'm not mistaken, I was gazing at the sky at that moment when the sound of a branch snapping made me stand up from the chair. The night has sounds and I'm used to them, but that one somehow put me on edge. I didn't know exactly what it was, but something in the environment made me nervous. I took my flashlight and aimed toward the noise, but of course I didn't see anything. That was brief, but enough to make me stop feeling comfortable in the place I was. I no longer wanted to sit in the chair or admire the sky. I just wanted to go home. That was irrational, and realizing that, I felt silly for being so scared. But suddenly I remembered something Thomas told me. I lit the campfire in a rush, as if that fire could drive away what had been with me since Friday, but there was no way. It was there with me, watching me, and I could feel it by the weight and the discomfort it had on the back of my neck. At that moment, I didn't know what else to do, and I've never been a religious person. But I prayed to God for it to stop while cursing myself for staying one more night. I checked my phone, but there was no signal, so I put it back in my bag and pretended to be normal, though it was impossible. Again, the noises among the trees alerted me, and no matter how much my flashlight lit up, I could see nothing but trees and bushes. I switched it off and raised my voice, asking who was there. I got no response, not a verbal one at least. I sat down and assumed again that my nerves were betraying me, that I was imagining everything. Nothing is happening, Hector. That was the last thing I told myself before I saw something that changed forever the way I have camped in front of me. And through the fire of my campfire, I distinguished a pair of red spheres, the size of billiard balls and as bright as a pair of flashlights. I froze and watched them, thinking they were laser pointers or something. I tried to ask who was there, but the words wouldn't come out. I could only stammer something I don't remember. Laser pointers leave a trail, but these bright spheres not only had no trail, they were too large and moved slowly toward me. This time my body reacted. I crouched immediately and grabbed a rock while shouting at it to stay away. I was shaking like crazy, and when I saw that it didn't respond, I threw the rock hard, and I know I had to hit it, because I saw the rock fly straight between those eyes, but it pierced it. A second later, the deepest, most macabre voice I have ever heard echoed through the entire forest. I didn't understand a single word of what it said, but I know it was talking to me. At that moment, my immediate impulse was to run into the forest and put as much distance as possible between that thing and me. But somehow I knew that's what it wanted. After all, what was stopping it from attacking me? I didn't know, but if it hadn't done so until then, there must be a reason. I stayed near my campfire, keeping it alive, and all night long I collected dry branches to keep the fire as intense as possible. It was one of the worst nights of my life, because at times those incorporeal red eyes would disappear and reappear from another angle on the trees along the ground, and that voice spoke to me twice more, making my knees tremble. I thought I would die, and nothing in my life has surpassed the terror I endured that night. Only when the sun came up did I know that that thing had gone. Although, in reality, it hadn't gone. I just couldn't see it. Yet I could feel it hidden among the trees, watching me as I ran with all my things on my back to the ranger station. Arrived around 10 in the morning, and they greeted me cheerfully. One of them even told me they had been waiting a few hours longer. At that moment I broke down and told them what I had lived through. I didn't care that they thought I was crazy, and yet that's the least thing they did. None of the three had experienced something so extreme. But they told me something I had realized that it's that entering the field during Holy Week is dangerous. There are many spirits floating around here and there, and not all of them are good. I went back home, thinking about how horrible what I experienced was. And when Kata arrived later, I welcomed her warmly. I didn't dare tell her what I experienced until some time later, so as not to predispose her and make her not want to travel with me again. And although this experience didn't stop me from continuing hiking and camping, I'm very careful with the dates. I never camp during Holy Week or in October anymore, so as not to run into something that human eyes should never see.